if you define addiction as paying a higher and higher price after not being able to stop a thing, I lost my career, I lost my son for 18 months and 5 days, I lost my marriage, I lost the opportunity to govern the greatest city on earth. So I lost a lot because it was, for me, acknowledging that I had an addiction required me basically eliminating every other fucking option there could have possibly been.
This is Anthony Weiner. He is a former New York City councilman, 7-time congressman, twice would-be mayor, and a forthcoming, perhaps, city councilman again.
Yeah, that's the public stuff, yeah.
You like that? Okay.
Yeah.
So
you left out all the scandal, the prison time, the whatever it is, all that stuff. No, I don't want. No,
I wasn't
totally, gonna. It's totally. It's just that was a decision. That was a choice.
Anthony, I'm not going to invite someone to sit at my table and just be like, let's talk about prison and scandal.
I've had conversations where there's been exactly that. Like, we can't have any conversation until we get rid. Let's puncture this thing. Get it. It's a choice, but it's entirely your choice. You're much better at this. You know, I've been a fan of yours since watching you on The Stoop.
Thank you.
And to your credit, when you asked me to come on and do your show, there was no like, oh, you should build a narrative around something else. It's like, do you want to do my show about sobriety? And I'm like, yeah, I'll do your show about sobriety, and then I'll go on. And if I think, I try to stress to people that sometimes it's just taking the temperature of the moment. Does this feel like the next right thing to do? And then doing it. Whereas in my old life, especially when I was acting out, it was a constant churn of what does it mean? How does it look? What does the next 12 weeks look like?
Yeah.
What are the optics?
I hate that word,
what
optics.
is right, and all of that kind of stuff can be a little bit consuming of like any ability to kind of take stock of what's going on.
I'll tell you why I asked you to come on. I read the New York Times article in November when you were getting your haircut. And the reporter said that you were using the language of recovery, amends, service, and I didn't know you were in recovery. So I thought, I didn't know if he was a drinker like me, but it wasn't that, it turns out.
It was not that. I'm not, I know I gave up when I took my first step around sex addiction, which is what I struggle with. I also stopped drinking, and I was never much of a drug user, but I did lose my brother Seth to addiction. And,
Sorry, why did you stop drinking?
Well, too much of the acting out that I was doing had an element of alcohol and around it, but also the idea of being clear-headed and giving my addict mind as little space as possible to do the tricky stuff meant just basically being on my game as much as possible. But also, there are a lot of people that I experienced in the rooms that are cross-addicted and who struggle with alcohol, and I know my brother was an alcoholic. And I knew it wasn't doing anything good for me. I knew that.
Yeah.
That even if I did have the ability that you don't have and don't have the allergy around it that you have and that others have, it still didn't mean that it was contributing anyway to me being a better person.
What would your special health ring think about you and your alcohol?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, and the calories and whatever it is. I mean, all that being said is that I figured that if I was going to start to live a life of kind of taking inventory of whether the things I were doing was actually making me a better, healthier person in all my different ways of life, then it wasn't adding anything. I mean, I can argue that the caffeine I have in the morning, that at least adds something to my life, but the alcohol wasn't. And also there was an element of me using alcohol at the same time I was acting out online and acting out with strangers and things like that. But and also a certain amount of fear about, like, you know, when I think that I have alcohol, I think I have addictive tendencies in my family. For example, when I blew a knee playing hockey, and I was given a lot of a huge thing of oxy to take if I needed the pain. It was even small amounts I found myself actually thinking, I hope I have a little bit of trouble getting to sleep tonight, because then I'll have a justification to take one of these things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's something wrong with that. When my mind is starting to think that. Now, admittedly, people, you know, I had the ability to not do it and to stop. But even just telling the story, I'm kind of remembering.
Yeah.
euphoric recall, whatever they call it. I'm remembering that feeling. Oh my God, that was amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So again, being someone who doesn't, who has found himself getting tricked into doing these addictive things again and again, anything that I can do to take out of my mix that made a little bit easier to keep some rigor in my life, I did.
Brother, that is impressive. I really applaud you for that. So I knew I was an alcoholic from childhood. I just knew it when I even heard about it. I'm like, that is for me, and I knew probably that it was going to go way downhill, and then I was going to end up in recovery. Were you like knocked out when you realized that you had an addiction issue?
No, I heard your interview with Hank Azaria describe himself as a high bottom drunk. Mine was the lowest of low bottoms. I had to really go look at this shit. I mean, when you say you can look online for my story, that flattens everything out to the most ridiculous degree, and a lot of what people read is not true. But if you define addiction as paying a higher and higher price after not being able to stop a thing, I lost my career, I lost my son for 18 months and 5 days, I lost my marriage, I lost the opportunity to govern the greatest city on earth. So I lost a lot because it was, for me, acknowledging that I had an addiction required me basically eliminating every other fucking option there could have possibly been. Even when I checked into rehab, it was a function of, all right, I'll do this next, but I'm not really believe. Now, as it turned out, it was an amazing blessing that I did, because I discovered other people that had similar things, and I understood a scaffolding for how to manage it and to deal with it and to live with it and to understand it. But it wasn't as if I was like, I wonder if it was like every other possible explanation that I can come up with.
Right. So by process of elimination, I'm a sex addict.
Correct.
All right. So listen, for our viewers and listeners who aren't quite clear, Anthony has struggles with sex addiction, and there was some texting that went down several years ago, and it really threw everything on its ear. How's that?
That is about the shortest possible version of it, but yes. I mean, yes.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't think we need to rehash all the details. So it's really hard to recover as a famous person, because everybody is scrutinizing every detail. At least that's what I think. Has your notoriety helped or hurt your efforts to get sober?
Well, let's make a distinction. You can't shake a dead cat without finding a public person who struggled with alcoholism. You can even find a lot that have struggled with drugs. If you're going to try, if you want to, take a pause from this podcast and try to find anyone who talks openly about dealing with sex addiction, you're going to have a tough time finding it. It's arguably the last frontier of addiction, and there are probably some people who struggle in the beverage program or struggle with narcotics who would probably listen to this podcast and say, I don't even believe that's a thing.
Oh, it's a thing.
Right, but I'm not here to persuade anyone if they don't believe it's a thing. That's totally, I don't have what other people think is not my concern. But so to that degree, it is required, it's made it more difficult because I have the burden, and I think all sex addicts have the burden of first building a platform on which they explain that the thing, what it is, it exists, and then talk about their own experience with it. Whereas people in other programs, we all have addiction in our families,
right.
But this is a difficult one because it requires people to be oriented a little differently around it, and also for a lot of people, it manifests in very different ways. So not only do you have to talk about it being a thing, but also how it affects me. So in that way, it has been hard. But in fairness, until now, and I've been on the radio for a couple of years, and on the radio, if people want to call and it's political stuff. But if people want to call me names and talk about I'm totally there for that. I'm there for if people.
Why?
Well, for one thing, that's what Shout Radio is all about, is people calling each other names. But part of it is I make this distinction, and I say calling names. There are people who have good faith, who raise good faith questions about it, and I have all the time in the world for that. And and one of the things I think I'm trying to be of service here is to be forthright about something that other people have a lot of difficulty being forthright with.
Right. And it's very brave, by the way.
I don't know.
It is.
You know, firefighters are brave, coal miners are brave. Anthony Weiner is not that brave going on a podcast.
Agreed. I hear you on that, and so much love to the firefighters and police officers. However, you could have handled this a million other ways, rather than putting some sunshine on something that people probably find shameful and find also kind of intriguing. And it's not easy, and you've done it, and you're doing it, and I think it's awesome.
Well, I mean, you devote a whole podcast to having frank conversations about this. So people do it. Look, here's the thing about it, is that for many addictions there is a well-worn path of people who have set examples. And one of the challenges of struggling with addiction, and a lot of the discussion around anonymity in these programs, is that you don't want to hold yourself up to be an exemplar of anything. I could slip tomorrow,
right.
And I don't want someone saying,
correct.
Look, you see, he's full of shit.
Right.
So I am nothing to celebrate. People go through ups and downs in their life. I've gone through ups and downs around this. People struggle with a lot of things,
yep.
And I've got a lot of blessings. So I'm not holding myself out to be any kind of an exemplar of anything.
How does it affect your dating life?
Well, I'm a chick magnet, you know that.
Yes, obviously.
No. Look, I mean, first of all, I mean, my primary, Huma and I have a remarkable relationship around, and she's involved with someone else and engaged to be married, and I feel amazing for her. And we have Jordan as our son, who's the locus of so much of what we do. It's a challenge because a lot of my acting out I did online. I mean, all of my acting out I did online. And in 2025, you don't give someone a ring on the telephone and go out. So there's a lot of very healthy interactions with people that go on. Here's my friend's number. Text them, see if they're free for a drink, that kind of thing, or a coffee. It is complicated being a famous person whenever you're involved in anything, because you don't know what people's motivations are. But one of the things that I try as best I can to meet people where they, in the spiritual sense, meet them where they are and assume good faith until proven otherwise.
Right.
Now, some people might say, well, that's a stupid idea. What you should do is you should have a screening committee and you should hire a private detective agency to make sure everyone's on the up and up. Are there people that reach out to me that just want to tell their friends, whatever? But I can't proceed in life like that. I have to assume that people are mostly of good faith. But I don't date a lot, so bottom line.
On a first date, you have to be like, all right, sex addiction, this happened, jail, or do you let that come out naturally, or they already know and they're...
No. Here's the thing is that again, one thing I try not to do is use all the various techniques around rationalization and gaslighting. I try to be as rigorously honest as I can. And it's hard, right? Because in many ways, when you're dating, there's a lot of artifice involved. Like you get dressed and you want to look you want to look as good as you possibly can. You want to whatever it is. You want to present as well as you possibly can. But for me, it's almost necessary to make it clear. Look, this is. The problem is, imagine going on, like we all, Google our first dates, what's the story? Imagine having my Google.
This is what I'm saying, right?
So I can't pretend I can have conversations and I sit down at a two-top with a woman and we've got 5 elephants sitting with us that one by one have to be pierced.
Right.
But in fairness, it's a little bit of a test for her as well, in my eyes, and how frank and honest they're prepared to be. And if they're going to be kind of spooked by the idea,
they're not your person.
They're probably not. We're probably not. As people have said, is that 2 addicts can be in a relationship if they're in recovery. That an addict can be in a civilian community if they both, to some degree, are involved in recovery. An addict, even if they're in recovery with a civilian who is in a way not kind of engaged with that, it's really going to be hard for it to work.
Yes.
You don't have to go to Al-Anon meetings, and you don't have to, read the literature, but you have to be kind of engaged with that person where they are.
Yes.
I went on a date not long ago with a woman who was insistent that I'd have drinks with her, that I drink. and it was because their framework around dating was like, I'm not going to sit here and drink while you have a non-alcoholic beer, whatever it is. And to try to explain it was fine. It was a fine first date because I knew there's not going to be a second date because of this problem. But by the way, not for nothing, people all the time don't have second dates because of something that they found on the first date. So we spent too much time on this. Long story short, I don't do it a lot. However, it is in forefront of mind as much as it is in other elements of my life where I kind of think of myself. It's one of the things when I have a self-image now, it is about, I am a former politician, I'm a father, I'm a hockey dad, whatever it is, but I'm also someone who struggles with addiction, who's in recovery to try to manage it.
That's it.
This has become a much more present question in my life in that I'm considering running for office and had a position, the scandal and the time in prison and the crime itself had to position it in the conversation when voters get to decide what they think is important, but how do I deal with it? And there's no one answer. I mean, sometimes the very same people who believe ardently and protest around the idea of criminal justice reform, that people go to prison for things for too long, that are then, when they get out, they have trouble returning to society because we have this notion that you're never truly clear of a crime. There are a lot of people, and I met many of these men inside, that they are going to deal with that the rest of their lives. When I came out of prison, I ran a countertop company out in Brooklyn, and we hired the formerly incarcerated. And when the word got out that was happening, we were just deluged with. And so the very same people who advocate for this notion of criminal justice reform are the people who are now pointing fingers at me, says, Weiner, you have no right to even stand before us and ask for this job. However, that does not mean that people can't have legitimate questions and like, what do you, look, I went to prison for obscenity. I'm the only person in the history of the Southern District ever to go to prison for obscenity. But I was a high-profile person who gets targeted for criminal justice because I make an example for someone else. That's the purpose, to be a deterrent to other people. But the difference is that if you're just Johnny Q. Public and you come out of prison and you have a 6-year gap in your resume and the question comes up, it is very hard to kind of figure out how to manage that. And I really, one of the things I argue in this campaign that I'm running is that people should vote for me because I was on that journey, not in spite of that journey. Like they should say, wait a minute, this is someone who has a collection of experiences that includes interacting with this part of our system. But again, I have so many blessings that other people don't have. Not everyone can go on a podcast and speak their heart about these things. And
one good scandal gets you right here at Soberness, so give us a ring.
I take that responsibility seriously. I will say this. So when I got into prison, there was no AA. There was an AA meeting in the facility. I was in federal prison, in a medium security prison, and obviously there's no program for sex addicts, but there was.
But there should be in there.
Yeah, maybe. Yes, but there was a 12th meeting that I kind of took over because it had kind of been dormant. But they put it in the psych wing of the thing. So it was this remarkable experience that I was in with these guys. Now in the federal system, there are a lot of. Okay, I don't know where the story's going. Where the story is going is it was rewarding for me. I realized after a while, every once in a while, someone would come in program and would join the meeting, and then they'd rotate or go out somewhere else. But the guys that were there the longest, the guys that are in this psychiatric part of the prison, they were there for the cookies and the coffee. They were there just as something to do. Sure. So much about prison is just figuring out ways to burn some time.
Check out your programs.
And but I found after the reason I was doing it was after first feeling some level of frustration because it was really tough to keep a rigorous program there. It was for me. It was for me being of service to these guys.
Did you feel, to use recovery parlance, a part of when you were in prison, or did you feel apart?
Oh, no. I first of all, prison is like any other community, as you may know from your brief time just visiting. It's like any other community. There are people in there who are brilliant. There are people in there who are interesting. There are people in there who are not nice people. There are people there who, frankly, should be in there and probably won't function very well anywhere else.
Yes.
And there are people that have interesting experiences. Being someone who came from public life, one option was not available to me, just kind of blend in and be a bozo on the bus, nobody. But my being from New York, being a politician from New York, I was able to navigate it. It was not a safe place for anybody, and it wasn't a completely safe place for me, but I was able to navigate it by investing some time in different communities inside that they're the older, long-time African-American guys that hung out in the law library. And for them, I was a member of Congress. I can tell them how these things get written and where they should look for things like that. I had a job cleaning toilets in the rec yard, and so the guys that worked out, whatever it is, I had a little piece of that community. I lived with the storeman in my unit, and so I helped him run the store. Long story short, I was able to survive using what I learned about being a politician.
Transferable skills.
And also just knowing that everyone has value. Like when you're a politician, you're constantly looking at your community as a way, all right, how do I show these people I understand their situation? And so that became of use to me inside. So I was never someone who was like, okay, now I know I was a high profile person inside, but just like when you're running for office, you're trying to communicate that I'm one of you to your constituents. I was able to do that in prison as well to some degree, but I not that I would recommend it to anyone. It was a good
prison,
or that it was a fun experience or anything like that.
From day one, when you walked through that gate, to day 750 when you walked out the gate, what can you point to as the greatest shift in you?
So I don't know. I mean, you could argue, and I don't want to get too deep.
Let's not argue.
Juan could argue if he were here.
Juan, it's not here.
Is that the same fundamental deficiency that I had in terms of like my emotional wiring, not me trying to find ways to click my emotional wiring to make it give me the reaction that led me into my addiction and led me into prison, was the thing that helped me survive inside. Meaning, I was able to look down at my feet every day, go about my routine, and check off another day. That I'm. When people would say to me, "God, how did you survive with 30 TV cameras outside your house?" I survived because I had no other choice. I had to get to the next day, and then the next day, and the next day. That way of engaging with life, that you practice in recovery to some degree, allowed me to do that inside. I recently had an experience as someone reached out to me, and I have now, on Valentine's Day this year, I will have been 6 years since I walked out of prison. And they reached out to me online, and they sent me a screenshot of a letter that I had written them. They must have written me, and I wrote them. I'm not saying that it rang a tiny bell, or look, I had zero memory of having written that letter. Zero memory of the person's name. And I did. I communicated with people inside. I have a vague whatever. And it was 1 month after I had gotten in. And I just think that what was probably happening was I just wasn't even letting memories in. I wasn't even I was just kind of like doing day by day. Now, is that useful? No, it's probably not. It's probably the opposite of the way you should live life. You should probably be as present as you absolutely possibly can. However, for the purposes of surviving 18 months and 5 days in a dangerous prison environment when you're away from your 6-year-old, I probably came with a toolkit that made that possible. And how that interacts with, they say that for some people in the room say that my addiction is a gift, like it's something like you learn to kind of embrace the idea that, okay, if it weren't for this addiction, I would not be in recovery and I would not be where I am sitting with Kat. To some degree, I think that I was given certain skills and certain abilities to be able to survive things like prison, and I'm glad that I was.
Me too. However, the question was, how were you different when you came out from when you went in?
I think that I had experienced people inside, and I understood I understood what it was like to survive it. But you know, when I sometimes kid with my 13-year-old son, you know what I learned in college? The single thing I learned is how if I ever went back to college, how I would do it so much better.
Yeah.
So now, is that useful in prison to like know how you do prison better the next time and how I don't? The answer is no. There was nothing that good that came out of it, except to say that I am a firm believer that you know, I said when I was sentenced, and my lawyer told me not to say this, that, you know, you do come to not regret. You come to accept that what happened before was for a reason. And so I believe part of my journey was that 18 months and 5 days in prison. I wish I could exercise it for my life, but it's there. It's part of the arc of my story. It's the part of who I am. But if you want me to say, you know, I learned to really appreciate Chicken Day on Thursday, I don't have anything like that for you.
I got you. You touched on something interesting. I bring it up on the show a lot. People love to say, hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. Not this girl. I am not grateful. I fucking hated being an alcoholic, hated being sober. I hate the hurt I've caused. And every time I say that out loud, I feel like I hear the universe saying, Cat Greenleaf, shut up, because you have a great life now, you should be grateful. And I am grateful for my life. However, it was so painful going through everything I went through that gratitude doesn't jump to mind at the moment.
Yeah.
It's hard to...
I guess, I mean, so the metaphor I use is the stock market. You know, the stock market doesn't go up or down, it goes up and down, and you just hope that it's better year over year. And I think if there's an expectation that life is going to go all one way, it's not.
Right.
It's not going to. And for everyone listening to this podcast, they've experienced that in different ways, right? The notion that bad stuff happens, and worse stuff than happened to Kat, believe it or not, worse stuff than happened to Weiner, believe it or not. And I think that if you contextualize the idea of this journey, like it could very well be that I needed to hit that lower bottom because that's what it took. That's what it took.
And yet you're still a person who has this addiction. I'm still a person who has an addiction. So is it that you hit that rock bottom, or that rock bottom, anyway, that low point, and you just don't ever want to go back there again, so that's an impetus for you to keep your addiction under wraps?
Yes, but some of it is also, I need to be reminded, right? It's like, I mean, I hate to be a bumper sticker factor here, but like the one thing my addict is really great at is convincing me that I'm not an addict.
Right.
That's like its superpower, right? So when people would say to me, why did you keep returning to these behaviors when you kept having this problem? And it's because my addict is like really, really good at saying, you're fine. Who's gonna give a shit if you're texting with some stranger? Who's gonna care about that kind of thing? And I mean, look, by the way, in my addiction, there's a lot of people out there in the world who are saying to me, you know, Weiner, what you did was not so bad. Everyone does what you do, you know, whatever it is. And so there's a lot also externally telling me, dude, you're fine.
Right.
And so in a way, being reminded every so often that you're not fine, that there's a different set of rules for you than there is for everyone else, just the same way there's a different set of rules around eating ring dings for diabetics than everyone else, there's a different set of rules for me. So there is, but I'm not like, well, I'm like so glad that that's the way I turned out. However, I do kind of get the idea that people have shit. This is something that I have, and it's on me now to try to figure out how I don't have that impact my family and my community and myself anymore.
Yes. Yes to everything you just said. So you are running for office, returning to your roots at the city council.
Yeah, that's the idea.
That's the idea. So is it because, Anthony, you want something to do, you don't know how to do anything else besides be a politician, you feel like you need the platform to absolve yourself, or you love New York City and what is it?
That's a lot. That's really a great cataloging, because I'm sensitive to the idea it might be any number of those things. And I've now been doing this a little bit more than a month, and people say to me, well, you keep saying you're thinking about running, you're exploring running, you've raised a bunch of money, and people are coming out in support of you, and you're going to political events. Just say you're running already. And part of it is I'm still at this process where every day I'm checking, like, okay, what is this about? Because it's a perfectly reasonable thing. If you're a therapist or just a random observer on the street, is the career choice what fed this need for affirmation, which is what fed this insatiable need to communicate with strangers online? Is it like, where is the snake eating its head, like in all of this? And is the career part of the problem, or is the career a way of acting in a way to put the energy in a positive direction? I think it's a couple of things. I think to some degree, this is what I was put on earth to do. I think I've got skills around communicating ideas, thinking about ideas, implementing ideas, persuading strangers that I'd be good to work for them, getting elected, and then going to service. That's actually what I'm pretty good at. For a while, I've been scratching the itch by being on the radio, of talking about ideas, and being a liberal guy on a conservative radio station, engaging people. It scratches the itch to some degree. But when I'm describing to my now old enough to understand son the notion of service, the idea of being, well, I'm going to be a little tiny bit of service when I could be more service, and then the question becomes, well, why? Why am I making that decision? And people would come to me all the time, you should run for office again. And I would say, well, we saw how that worked out. You obviously are unaware that I had whatever it is. Or I would say, give someone else a chance. But what it came down to was basically, I was staying in a somewhat defensive crouch still because of my addiction, because of the crime, and because of my scandal and everything else. And it did not feel like that was the right way to react. That at a certain point, if I have the ability to serve and I don't, that's a form of sin in my view. Like, if you can do it and you choose not to do it, then the question should be, all right, what's your reason? Like, why? And if it's fear, if it's shame, if it's, I don't want to be asked tough questions, damn, then that doesn't sound particularly persuasive, especially since the alternative is representing a community, doing a really good job for a community that really needs it. So, but in your question about motives is absolutely the right question. When I spoke to my sponsor about this, his first question was, well, what are your motives here? And when we cataloged them, I started to think about his advice, his brilliant advice was, every day, check what your motives are. And if Kat is asking the question, and you feel that your motives are more just, you just want to be famous again or something like that, then that's a sign that you should really think it through. But it's a legitimate question.
To me, you answered it with saying politics is what you were put on this earth to do. And I think it's a blessing, to borrow the word that you've been using, to have a clear idea of what you have been put on this earth to do. So the real question would be, then why wouldn't you do it?
Right, that's the case. So sometimes I'll have people say to me, Weiner, you've disqualified yourself from living in public life because of the things that you've done. And
I mean, I'm sorry. Has anyone noticed the election and like other people who've done bad things in public?
Yeah, but remember, there are a lot of people who didn't choose him for that reason. I mean, let's remember, half the country didn't choose him, and part of it was because they thought he had disqualified himself from me. So people have different views on that, and I'm open to that conversation about, like, okay, is that the case? I guess when people say you shouldn't be, and go back to the hole you crawled out of, my thing is, well, no, I'm going to choose not to stay in a self-imposed kind of thing. And now that I've been doing this for a while, it feels like the right thing to do, because even my harshest critics, I get a chance to think through what they're saying and try to understand what's at the core of what they're saying. And if what their core is what they're saying is a good faith question about whether or not I'm going to relapse, or if I'm going to be vulnerable to blackmail or whatever it is, if it's a good faith question about my health and well-being, or whether my son would struggle, would suffer because he sees nasty bumper stickers out there about me, I'm there for that. But if it gives me a chance to answer the question, well, just go away already. Like, where do you want? Why? And if you want me to go away, does that mean you want other people who have done things that they regret to just go away? And then it becomes, wait a minute, don't we all have people in our lives who have done things that are regrettable or done things?
It's about people in our lives. Haven't we all done things that are regrettable?
It's allowed me to frankly think through this, but your question's exactly the right one. It's like, is this the right thing for Anthony Weiner to be doing now? And ultimately, when you're in public life, it's the voters that get to decide that.
Listen, this is a new podcast. We need some ratings. Can we just announce your candidacy here and now, please?
When's this episode going to drop? Well,
I don't know when you're going to tell me. Give me the big news. We'll drop it. It would really help me out.
You know, I'm only in politics to help out your podcast, Kat. You know that.
I appreciate that.
That's the only reason.
The public knows that.
I am. No, but I mean, look, I'll be glad to come back on again. And look, I'm getting a lot of green lights. People are flashing. There's a lot.
Now you've got a green leaf. So
right, exactly. Well done. Well done.
Give me something.
Well done. If I run, I think I'll win, and if I win, I think I'll be of service to the city, and if I'm of service to the city will get better, and then everyone benefits. That's the hope.
That was bullshit. Come on.
But by the way, there are other reasons. Like if I also announce here, I have to go off my radio show because we're on terrestrial radio. We have FCC rules.
Oh man.
So there's that too.
Do you want to give up that radio show?
It's kind of fun. Look, I would rather be the one voice on a conservative radio station playing, classical music on a rap station than to be the 15th voice saying the same kind of thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like I totally find that much more nourishing and more fun.
That's right in your lane.
Yeah, and talk about service, like someone's hearing the same thing 15 times as opposed to one person checking them and saying, maybe this is a different way to look at it. So I enjoy my time on the radio. And if the political comeback thing doesn't work out, and I have to do that more, and
why don't I fill in for you while you're running? I will be your fill-in on the show with Chris.
You'd be great at it.
I
don't think I'd ever get the job back.
No, you get the job back. Would you like a job sharing?
Yeah. Oh, I'd love. Yeah.
Is that even a thing? Job sharing?
It probably is.
No, well, that's what's going to happen for us. Listen, whether you run or not, and he is running, you heard it here first. Just kidding. I wish you very good luck.
Thank you.
You've taken your recovery really seriously. I know it's an everyday thing, and I say this to lots of people, not just famous ones on my show. I am so proud of you.
It's nice of you to say.
Hard.
Thank you.
This is a hard thing that we are burdened with, and you have made the best.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you.